Good morning, everyone. It does look like we have a quorum. Can we do a call of the roll just to see who we have here? We'll start in New York City office.
Franklin and Vilda are both here.
Excellent. And how about joining us from using WebEx?
Joel's here.
Bill's here.
Okay, I see that Stephen is there, but I didn't hear his voice, so perhaps.
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Excellent. Yes, thank you. We can. Here in the room, we have.
I'm Phil Giltner from Lieutenant Governor Benjamin.
Excellent. And then we have Shoshana and my staff, Kristen, and Jake are here.
And David, if you can hear us, I'm working on assigning you as a participant right now.
You see David as an attendee at the moment?
Attendee.
Okay.
See him.
Okay. I see his avatar. David, can you hear us?
Yeah, we can't see him here, and we don't see Hadley.
Hadley hasn't joined us yet, but I do see DS for David Schultz, and I just don't hear him.
This is the plus one at the bottom.
Yeah, I guess this is a terrible system. Let's just record that this is not the best system.
Yes, we can.
Yes.
Thank you.
Oh my goodness, you filled the screen, David.
All right, so we have, it looks like a quorum of members, and we can begin. Welcome everyone to the October meeting. The item on the agenda that follows the roll call is the approval of minutes from the September 21st meeting. May I have a motion?
No. Well, I have some comments. We can make it. I can make them before or after the motion.
Is it for changes? Because
Yeah, it's for
okay.
changes in the minutes. So, I mean, one of the items we have down at number 5 is rules of order, but since we don't have our rules of order in place, we'll just proceed as we have proceeded for the last 45 years, which is by consensus. First of all, in approval of minutes, we talk about the approval of the December 11th, 2020 minutes with a change. I never received a copy of the revised minutes that reflect the final version. So if you could make that change if you haven't already, and send it around to us, I think for our records we ought to have complete minutes. There are many ways to do minutes, and I've been doing them for most of my life. And I have a preferred method of flagging subjects that were discussed, but only not recording necessarily the back and forth, but recording when decisions were made and touching on all the topics. I think I know work was done on these minutes, and I'm appreciative that they were not easy to do, but I feel like one of the things you don't get to do is just pick and choose what comments to include and what comments not to include. And some of my comments were included, and some were not. And the minutes suggest that I was the only person, or virtually the only person, who spoke in the meeting, which was certainly not true. The points that I would like to see included, if we're going to have discussion of the topics, is there were several points that I made. One was that I thought, I bemoaned actually, that we had lost our collegiality and even our civility, which was evidenced, I thought, by the meeting itself. Second, I thought that we were shunning our role as advocates or advisors as to what the law and practice should be, rather than a recitation of how courts have ruled and what existing law is. And I think that we continue with that issue in our draft report. The third point that I made was, or that was discussed, was committee structure. And I made 2 points in that regard, at least 2 points. One was I thought there were benefits to having a chair or some structure for our organization. Others may disagree, but that was a point that I made. And secondly, I thought that the defining issue, a defining issue was the balance between the committee and the staff, who reports to who runs our meetings, who sets the agenda, and I think that continues to be an issue. The next comment that I think is not dealt with adequately in the minutes is the issue of public comment. I and others attempted to have it public comment at the meeting, and others opposed it. There was no actual vote. Today, further down on the agenda, somewhere, item 4, I intend to make a motion to permit it with some limitations, but the fact is it was discussed at the last meeting, and many people spoke to it, not just me, and many people, some people opposed it. There also was a recommendation, and I'm not sure who it came from. It may have come from Dave Schultz, to rethink FOIL from the ground up. Now, maybe that's not something that should be in the minutes, but I didn't really see that reflected in the draft annual report, and we can discuss it when we get to the report, but that comment was made. So I just want those to be in the record. If we're going to have this kind of minutes, those points should be in it. As I said, it's not my preferred way of doing minutes, but those are my comments.
Well, then why don't, Franklin, why don't I redo the minutes based on the way we've been doing them in the past and recirculate, and then we can at our next meeting put forward those minutes as we used to do them around for a vote. I attempted to make the minutes more fulsome and descriptive as some folks last time, and I think you might have been among them, but maybe I misunderstood what you meant, wanted to see. So why don't I try to redo them in the style that we used to do them, and then we'll see if those are any more acceptable. Does that work for you?
I'm not sure.
Could I?
I'm not sure. Go ahead.
I don't know how the process to be heard in this. I didn't mean to interrupt, but I have two questions, or a comment and a question. One is, I did want to reinforce what Franklin said, because I was going to make the comment separately, that the minutes are not really what I was proposing. Not just that we should look at what other people are doing to decide if there's something to do, but that it's a moment to urge the legislature to undertake a major review. That we have a new administration, we're coming up on 50 years, and there are things we need to do. And I don't think minutes capture that. And then my question is, when you say you'll redo them in the more limited style, are you suggesting you're going to delete all the comments? Because I don't think that's the way to go.
I guess Franklin was suggesting that I eliminate the back and forth and just go with decisions made and made.
No, that isn't what I was. That isn't what I was suggesting.
That's not appear to me. It seems to me that she was saying that it was spotty, and that there is a good moment to put some more detail in people's positions in here and things that were said, and that there should be more in it. I think is what she was saying, not less.
More.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, we can
Yes.
get on track to see if you want them to be more fulsome. I thought I heard you beginning say that you were interested in only having sort of proposals made and actions taken, but I can go back and
that is not what I was suggesting.
Okay.
I would have done these very differently. That's not to say that these aren't fine as are if more is added to them. It's just that I was surprised to see the main points I made during the meeting not make it through to the minutes. I'd also just like to make a comment about the way things used to be done. For 45 years, our minutes were very brief. We operated by consensus. very successfully for all those years. We're obviously at a different point now. But before your arrival, Shoshana, the committee expressed its interest in meeting more times during the year instead of just at year end. They were interested in changing, we were, and it wasn't me actually taking the lead on that. Were interested in making changes in how the committee operated. And so I don't think we're wedded to the way we used to do things by any means. But with the minutes, I just think we did not flag all of the subjects that were discussed.
If I may, this is Stephen. I think that the issue can be addressed not by the analyzing the end result of the minutes, but by, if we get the draft early enough, we can make recommendations for things to be included in the minutes that then we can vote on as an entity during the meeting.
That's certainly possible. These minutes were completed long before the draft of the annual report. I just didn't want to send you so many different emails, but happy to provide the minutes earlier in the process.
So let's just do a revision and send it back around to us, and
We'll vote at the next meeting.
and we'll vote at the next meeting. But we need to have our corrected minutes or final draft of our minutes from the December meeting
I think from September, no?
or September, whatever.
Yeah, from
September meeting. No, this is from the September meeting. So
Right,
they
if
were
I'll
of
send-
the December.
I'll send you a
sorry.
final
Yeah, of
version
the
of
December meeting.
2020 minutes. Yep.
Yeah.
The next item on the agenda was the draft that was circulated on October 15th of the annual report.
We do it by section?
I don't know.
Should we do it by section, Shoshana?
However, the committee members wish to proceed through, that's fine with me. We didn't include an introduction yet because we thought we'd capture the feeling and the focus perhaps at this meeting after everyone had a chance to look at the other sections. So we can begin with Roman 2.
Can I just raise some overall questions? One is, I thought, in fact, the minutes are, I thought that the staff was going to pull out from our prior reports things that they thought we should be in here. I didn't see any of those. Unless I missed.
Every single topic in the prior report that was discussed last year is in this report.
I'll have to go back.
They're kind of buried at
Had
the
some
end.
specific proposals that weren't there.
We didn't bury them. We tried to focus on what a priority might be this year.
Right. So and the second
Yeah,
thing is to just in terms of format, the summary of key cases is helpful, but I would be interested in the staff's assessment of whether they're right or wrong, or whether there are trends in the cases that we should be concerned about, either commenting on, suggesting that the legislature needs to correct them, or being in one way or the other. And
Yeah, I
specifically-
had a comment on.
and particularly on the whole section of 50A, which I do think it's important to include here, but we don't really, we highlight the issues of retroactivity and how to deal with unsubstantiated allegations, but we need, I think, as a committee, we should be taking a position on how that should come out, not just summarizing the conflicting views.
Certainly, I would invite you guys to render a conclusion about that.
Well, I'd like to echo what David said. I had an overall comment, which, and clearly a lot of work was done, and I thank you for that. We all thank you for that. But it's a bit like a skeleton with no meat or skin on it. The whole report is devoid of commentary. And specifically to the 5 pages of single-spaced case summaries that are included in the report. And I think you provided us with a version of that at our last meeting. And unless we're going to do what Dave just suggested, which is go through the cases and talk about which ones we think are correctly decided and which ones aren't, and which ones call for legislative solutions, they should just be put into an appendix at the end. And then we can pick out a few, but I don't think we should include just what looks like a law student, put together summaries of cases that many of us haven't read and included in the report. So I think virtually every section is simply devoid of commentary, which I would say as, our thoughts on. And the same thing is true with the legislative proposals. I think I said this last report. I mean, every section needs a topic sentence.
I would invite you to, as a group, come up with the commentary that you think is appropriate for these developments that have come up. What I view my role is to make sure that you are all aware of developments, of case law, of proposals that are pending, of facts that have come to our attention as a committee, and share those things with you. And then you as a group are responsible for rendering an opinion and taking a position if one is going to be taken to record and reflect in the annual report. Happy to do that.
So the first, right, so section 2 and 3 are pretty much factual, right? Like we're just trying to say if there were any changes to the laws that fall under the purview of the committee, right?
I believe that is the intention there, yeah.
If I could
So,
comment
I
a little
guess,
bit about something about section 2 as far as the factual part of it. The provided that the public has the ability to view or listen to such proceeding. Now, I haven't read it in detail, but there seems to be some interpretations that I have heard that suggest that at any public or at any WebEx node, there has to be opportunity for the public to access it. And I would differentiate between a video location and a WebEx. And if there's some ambiguity, and I haven't read the language, but if there's some ambiguity about whether or not a person can WebEx from a private location, I think we ought to at least take note of it.
Yeah, it is in the report, fully described and discussed in the section addressing the comments that we've received about it, and in the legislation that's being drafted out of a more permanent nature. The temporary measure here, Chapter 417, is meant to allow participation by members of public bodies at any location where they happen to be, including a private location. And they also may participate by an audio conference rather than a video conference. That is temporary until January 15th. After that time, we either revert to fully in-person meetings, because if there's no further amendment or no further executive order or no extender of this extension, or we have some new piece of legislation that potentially will be crafted and agreed to by that time that would take some positive step to expand remote meetings or hybrid meetings or fully remote. There are several options. We discussed this a little bit at our last meeting, but right now we are in a place where we were when the Executive Order 202.1 was pending, which pretty much said you don't have to have any kind of public participation at all in your meeting. You can have them fully remotely as long as you allow the public to view or listen contemporaneously with the holding of the meeting, and the members of the public body can be anywhere. But that expires on January 15th.
So should we at least then make reference to, I mean, is that what you're referring to on that last sentence? Like if I wanted more information, I would have to go to the website and do the key phrase declare disaster emergency and find that, or is it that you're saying that somewhere else in the report, is it under legislative recommendations?
It's right below in section 4. Section 2 is really the same as section 4. They both refer to the September 2nd, 2001 order.
No, but what I'm saying is that, for example, when Shoshana's talking about what expires in January,
It's right
already
there.
detailed below.
It's discussed
This
fully
piece.
a few inches below
Oh,
section
got
2.
it.
On that global issue, I would suggest that we endorse, I would suggest that we see how things unfold between this fall, and because problems are bound to come up with these interpretations, but I would favor as full a participation as the technology permits, in accordance with the governor's September 2021 order, that it be continued subject to whatever practicalities have unfolded. I mean, we're having trouble with our own meetings, so.
Do you mean the September 2021 piece of legislation? I don't know. I'm not aware of any orders that were issued in September, but if you're talking about
legislation. The
Yes, so-
legislation.
Okay, so,
Right.
Bill, you were right, that on page 10, just of this draft, under legislative recommendations, we do sort of more fully describe the sort of state of things now and the feedback that we've received we broke it out into 3 separate categories of feedback that we've received, just to make it easier for people to understand, where these calls and emails are coming from. And then we have sort of a discussion of the proposed amendments that are currently pending. What we could do, and what it sounds like the group, or at least several members of the group so far, have advocated that we do, is take a position on which of the proposals, or if none of the proposals are adequate, identify a potentially new route to go. I don't mind, as for where this appears in the report, doesn't much matter to me. I think we were trying to mirror how we put together reports in the past, but we certainly don't have to do that, and we can take the case law summaries, which were a lot this year, and there aren't always a lot, but they were this year, and move them to an appendix. That's perfectly fine, and just discuss those cases that you guys want to see discussed in the body of the report.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that the whole discussion of expanding the open meetings law in light of our experience of the last year ought to be, a standalone section up front with a recommendation from us. I must admit not to have read every word, but I did read the legislative proposals. All seem pretty good to me. So it may not be that we need to come out in favor of one over the other, but just state the principle that we think government should be as open as is reasonable and feasible.
Well, so what I might recommend, Franklin, that we do is take a look at the feedback that we've gotten, which I tried to summarize for you guys here. And then perhaps that will help everyone come up with what they think might be the best way forward, absent specific legislative proposals that are already pending. Some of them may mesh perfectly with the feedback, but not all of them do. There are issues with each one based on who you may be, what kind of a user of open meetings you are. Whether you're a member of a public body, whether you're a person wanting to attend a meeting of a public body, whether you're a member of the press, all of these persons have slightly different concerns and reservations and supports for these proposals. So I tried to capture that in the feedback section, so that hoping that would give you guys some idea of how you wanted to come down as a group.
Yeah, and the other 2 topics are way on page 16 with the barrier-free facilities. Do we like proactive or do we like reasonable? There are issues on that. And I'm not sure I quite understood the public comment in real time, but that seemed to be another issue. But all of those seem to me to need to be clumped together. And then what you have is CD, I don't know, way back at page 17 or so, is a whole slew of things that relate to expanding FOIL. And it seemed to me they could be clumped together with an A, B, C, and D as well, where we talk about the legislature.
I guess they are D, E, F, but we're happy to group all of the open meetings law proposals together. And we wanted to highlight the remote meetings piece. Obviously, there are ancillary issues that relate to open meetings that aren't specifically focused on what has happened over the pandemic, for example. But we can group all of those things together, and then sort of speak about FOIL, like open meetings first, maybe for the first time. We can speak about open meetings first, and then we can speak about FOIL second, and try to group things all together, summaries, proposals, recommendations, everything together, and then move on to the other statute. That's fine as a reorganizational. We can attempt to do that.
Could
I don't know
we,
if anyone.
Sorry. I was gonna just suggest if we can maybe talk about the substance and we can decide on the formatting later.
Yeah, that
So
was
that
sort
at
of
least, I know, I figured, okay.
But I think if you group the like things together, it provides an opportunity for a commentary on the different aspects of them. That's
No,
all.
no,
And
I
we've always,
hear you.
yeah.
I think it's like if, you know, I'm assuming Candace think is taking notes, you know, on, as we talk about the different topics, I would trust, I guess, that the staff will be able to put it together in whichever format we eventually decide, but I don't know, I feel like I don't want to spend too much time on formatting if we don't even know what we want to agree on recommending. So maybe we
and
can
I
do
don't
that.
think we should, this report should be devoid of commentary on existing case law from this list of 5 pages. I just think unless you're going to do, as Dave suggested, group them together in terms of trends or, you know, good or bad or decisions we disagree with, they just shouldn't be put in, you know, 5 single pages. But we should pick some out that as we always have to comment on.
So can we do that now?
I can't. Maybe you can't.
No, I guess okay. So for example, I guess I wanted to, the one of the issues seems to be, right, the unsubstantiated complaints and, you know, the arguments about invasion of privacy. And I guess, is that the type of issue that we usually would take a position on? Is that one of the things we're looking to do? I can't remember. I feel like I'm more into it this year than I was last year because of when I joined. So, anyone?
Which one are you referring to?
No?
Bill?
Okay. The unsubstantiated complaints issue, you know, with 50A, it seemed like there was like, right, we list some case law and like, you know, whether it goes retroactive. What?
I mean, that's pretty much established under the prior FOIL cases already, that it's not releasable. So I think
Well, I thought there was some
position on that.
legislative.
So yeah, what the law
I thought-
says about general unsubstantiated complaints filed against government workers, period,
Yeah.
regardless of the type of worker, that is sort of more established for sure. I think what Franklin was trying to draw out was whether there was some reason to consider these, because of 50A and whatever it has represented over the years, whether there was some reason to rethink that. Because it is an issue that has come up and it has been a bone of contention between litigants. I mean, it has been a litigated issue. It was a litigated issue before when it was with respect to your standard garden variety government worker, but now it's more of an issue when it's law enforcement personnel, government workers. Certainly the reasoning that case law has given for not treating them differently is because why would you treat them differently? But if somebody on the, you know, if we want to, as a group, if you want to say that they should be somehow, that the whole line of cases is wrong, or that they somehow should be treated differently, that's certainly your option.
Yeah, if it's not
I think
fixable
there's-
by legislation, then
I mean, it would certainly be fixable, Franklin, by legislation. I mean, the legislature could go ahead and say it is our intent that it is not an unwarranted invasion of personal privacy pursuant to the FOIL law to release an unsubstantiated pending or whatever complaint against a insert here government worker. They could do that. That would certainly clarify things. The question is whether that wants to be the recommendation of this group. Don't know.
And,
I think
and
there's a slightly different
retroactivity falls.
issue as well. Sorry. I think there's a slightly different issue as well that is part of the discussion, which is the definition of unsubstantiated. I know that some newspapers that have been pursuing this issue, the problem they have is that police departments will treat as unsubstantiated and therefore undisclosed any complaint that they haven't investigated or haven't resolved, definitively determined that it's baseless. And that's a big difference than saying something, we've looked at something and it's baseless and therefore it shouldn't be disclosed because it's unfair to the individual, as opposed to we have 20 complaints against Officer X for certain types of misconduct that we haven't bothered to look at and been able to look at yet, so we're not going to disclose any of them. And it is a very difficult issue, but I do think it's something we should take a position on, or at least urge the legislature to look at, because I do think there also could be arguments that police are differently situated than someone who works in the sanitation department or something else, because the nature of complaints against police have to do with the interference with rights of individuals in ways that are probably not as applicable to other types of government employees.
The potential summary could be something like that we urge the legislature to look at including or defining or somehow identifying a complaint that is not yet substantiated for purposes of trying to determine whether the disclosure would be an unwarranted invasion of personal privacy, something like that.
Yeah, I think that's the right approach, Frank. Sorry, Shoshana, but I would also maybe start it by kind of laying out the problem of it. Since the law has been amended, there has been a lot of litigation and concern about what constitutes an unsubstantiated complaint and when essentially baseless claims can be withheld because it's unfair in the interest of privacy if something's been proven untrue, as opposed to things that either haven't been proven or haven't been investigated. And so that it's an issue that needs to be looked at, but lay out the problem and then lay out some of the considerations that it may well be that police and law enforcement officers, the privacy interests are different. The public interest versus privacy balance is different with respect to complaints against certain types of government employees than others. And that also might be something that needs to be considered by the legislature, whether the same standard.
I wouldn't want to forget that, they may be worth considering differently, but we should also note that if a complaint is produced, and some entities, some municipalities, let's not lose sight of the fact, some municipalities are disclosing them. Some have taken the position that they've determined that it is an unwarranted invasion of privacy. Some have decided to disclose them. Because FOIL is permissive and not mandatory, with one exception, some entities have taken the position that the disclosure is okay with them. They don't read it as an unwarranted invasion based on their own analyses. That's fair, and that's just a different way every municipality does it. But some municipalities have argued, and it might be worth noting if we're going to talk about treating people differently, that if some of this information is released with respect to law enforcement officers, true or false, but unproven, they could subject those officers to heightened risk of harm in society, given the climate that we're currently operating in. So that might implicate even a different exemption to FOIL, which would be like for personal safety. So I want to make sure that we're not, whatever we craft isn't unintentionally advocating something that we wouldn't necessarily want to advocate, as a group. So whatever we summarize might have that kind of caveat in it.
While we're crafting that comment, we should take into consideration the duration of the outstanding complaint, because sometimes the feet are dragged.
Right. So because of that type of comment, Stephen, I thought when I was reading this on those sections, it looked to me like it's very fact specific. It really depends on the facts of the situation, and I'm concern of, as a committee, recommending something that's not going to take into account a reality that perhaps we're not aware of because, I don't know, at least I've never I've never been law enforcement in this particular sense, and understand, the realities. And on the flip side of that, the person who is seeking the records either. So I'm just kind of like a little afraid of doing what sometimes I feel we do as a government person, of being behind a desk and mandating and suggesting things when we really don't know what we are causing in practical terms.
Of course, you're right about that, but most of our recommendations over the years have had a caveat that said, of course, other exceptions under FOIL are available to protect rights. Let's not forget retroactivity, because that's as Dave pointed out, is another prong of the discussion. I'm not sure where the case law falls on this, but.
Sorry, I just wanted to make a quick comment. One is I think I'm the only records access officer on the committee. I don't know if anybody else here is. So I have particular sensitivity to what Vilda is saying in terms of the fact-intensive inquiry, because no two records are alike. And, sometimes there's some exceptions too that people take a little more seriously than others. I mean, in my, at the division, certainly, we have a lot of critical infrastructure things that, would certainly be compromising if they were to be released, and some that are not, obviously, and we do our best to make sure that we can release whatever we can. So I do think it is fact intensive, and I do agree that, there has to be some deference, but clarity is helpful as well. I actually agree with David. I don't know what unsubstantiated means at all. I know what it means in the context of maybe a state employee in the executive branch, but for a law enforcement agency, I don't know. So I think that we should be cognizant of both of those things when we make recommendations. My other request, I think, would be, and I just want to bring us back to anything that, I'm going to have, I think, some comments as well, because I agree that we need a little more rhetorical flush, although I appreciate the factually intensive nature of the draft report that was provided by staff. I think it's incredibly good. But anything that we can circulate in writing before the next committee for, I think, a more informed discussion would be so helpful for me, just, to consider. But I think that this discussion is, is great. I just want to make sure that we're fleshing out those things in sort of our own words, because there's been some issues with communication. So anyway, that's my statement.
Joel, I think that the effort will be to turn around the next version of this earlier, before the meeting. The issue, of course, with the last meeting being September 21st and then this meeting coming up so quickly thereafter, and basically whole cloth drafting, or a lot of updating and a lot of synthesis needing to be done. That's the reason why we didn't get this to you until late the Friday. Well, it was early Friday,
Not a problem.
On Friday. But I think that there will be more time for more reflection and thought by all of you before the next meeting, which we've set a date for. I can't remember what it is, but we've set it.
And can I just note, like this, in the,
Set a date.
I know sometimes we have concerns about referencing the past. I think I will bring it up here. In the past, committee members have sent their thoughts to us in writing, and I know that's appreciated. We said, if you send an email to staff and the committee with your personal thoughts and notes on the report, it gives everybody an opportunity to review those thoughts and opinions before the meeting. So we're not sort of people aren't caught off guard and having to think on their feet about what their opinion is. Our goal really was, I think Franklin used the term skeleton. That's what the intent is to provide the skeleton for the committee to provide the meat for. That's, our role was the skeleton, your role is the meat. So if you guys want to provide those comments to us in writing before the next meeting, that would be supremely helpful. Actually, before we do a next draft would be supremely helpful.
I would just second that. That has been the custom in the past, is we would get a draft and frequently would I know people would handwrite not comments, edits, revisions, and then circulate them in advance. And I think if we could do that for the next draft, I think if you take the comments today and revise it and then have a chance to give a input on the next version, that would be really productive.
Yeah,
That's
that'd be
the
great.
intention. We'll do the best we can to capture what we're hearing today about this. And, and we'll try better to group like with like, to sort of, it'll be more of a mix and match within each law as opposed to dealing with each sort of chunk of categorical thing. We'll deal with the whole law and everything that could, should, has been done to the law in the year. And then we'll move the case law summary to the back. We are, potentially we should consider keeping some of the discussion about the case law on unsubstantiated reports and the case law on retroactivity / does it apply to former employees kind of together, even though we also capture that in the summary appendix now. Just because it might inform the reader of why we're talking about these two specific issues. We're talking about them because they've actually been litigated, and these are the issues that we're commonly hearing about on this particular piece of law.
Of course. That's just what I was urging. That's just what I was urging.
In the past, in the past, Shoshana, I think that approach is right. In the past, we often, the front of the report would have 2 or 3 or 4 topics that we viewed as kind of major issues that pulled together things. And it would seem to me that this report calls out an approach where we would have up front, one section on the open meetings law and where it stands and the need for change, and talk about all that in one group, your comments, and pull that up so we have a coherent discussion about meetings law, because that's front and center on the legislative agenda. And then maybe another section about the implementation of 50A, the issues it's raised and where we need to look and put all that together. And I would add another section that I would even make first, but somewhere up front, which is time for reform. That would be a theme that, in 2 more years, it'll be the 50th anniversary of FOIL. We have a new administration coming in, that it really is time for the legislature to take a serious look and block out in that section some of the things that we know deserve attention in some kind of a reform. You already have a section on proactive disclosure, the question of whether there would be some kind of oversight authority where we could talk about what other states have done recently, like Ohio and Pennsylvania, to streamline FOIA enforcement in ways that both save money and make it work better. And any other thoughts, but have a section about, time for reform, new administration, new era, 50 years, something as a proposal to put on their plate. And then open meetings law and 50A implementation, and then kind of the others. I would take all that case law stuff and put it in an appendix, unless there are things that we think courts are off the track on. It should be pulled out again as something to highlight. But I think to just put all the cases in alphabetical order is really useful. I would even, at a minimum, I would group this by the issue that they're addressing. So if you're going to an issue, it's kind of useless. No legislature is going to read through all those, and I didn't even read through all of them. I kind of skimmed some of them.
Yeah.
It's a tough thing to break out because it's tough to break it out by topic covered because they often cover multiple topics. However, one case might cover 3 or 4 topics, so then you'd have something appearing. That's the issue with that. Certainly, maybe in future years we can try to figure out a hyperlinked way to.
I know that the problem that creates. What I suggest, Shoshana, is if we call it, significant developments. A court may deal with 4 or 5 issues, but some of them are well established and they're not. What we should be highlighting is like novel questions or changes in the law, and we should be able to highlight those. We shouldn't just summarize, 10 cases all held the same thing, which has been established for 30 years.
What you're really talking about is a taxonomy of important issues, dealing with them, and one case may be in several parts of that taxonomy, but as far as the there's a difference between unexamined and I've missed the other word that we were talking about in terms of the
Unsubstantiated.
unsubstantiated. We don't want unsubstantiated to bury unexamined, and to tease out that distinction might be something that's worthwhile.
And that's a big distinction. You know, I served for, I don't know, 10 years or more on New York City CCRB. And I don't know what the number is today, but it's pretty close to half of the cases that get, complaints that get filed don't get examined, don't get investigated, largely because the complainant, having said their piece, you know, walks away and doesn't cooperate with the investigation. So it's a huge, it is a significant, you can distinguish or not distinguish, but they are very different from the cases that we found were unsubstantiated, investigated and unsubstantiated. It's a big number. Begs the question of what you do with them, but teasing out the difference is important.
So we're all agreed and the report's finished?
Yeah,
Yeah,
sounds good.
you know, unless
seen
there's
it.
more specific feedback to stuff that did get reviewed, what we can try to do is reorder, re-emphasize, and I sort of restructure to the extent that that's what we've been talking about, the way the report reads, so the way the report is presented, and then add and include some of the concepts that we've just talked about, hoping that, you know, when we circulate that in the relatively near future, that it will provoke people to provide their responses to the more specific pieces for our next meeting, so that we can include all of those in the next draft to be circulated.
Can I ask
Potentially
Dave mentioned reform. Was there something specific that you wanted to include in that section, or just that generally that it should be reformed?
Yeah, I'd be curious if people agree with me, but I think we should have right up front a call to the legislature to take a serious look at FOIA reform and mention the thing. So we would mention some of the problems in terms of time, delay, inefficiency, things that aren't working, but potential ways of curing them. One would be to look more closely at proactive disclosure. And there's pieces in here already about what might be included in that take things that people want all the time. We should raise the question of the possibility of having a streamlined oversight authority for FOIA complaints. Like Connecticut has a commission like our Committee on Open Government, but it's actually a commission where FOIA appeals go to that agency. It's a different kind of concept. Ours is it's a quasi body, and it makes things work faster. It promotes uniformity in decisions and saves time and money. And as I was mentioning, Ohio and Pennsylvania have adopted versions of that. Just say to the legislature that something we should look at. We should talk about, whether it would, we need a function within government that collects data on FOIA, which we don't have right now. We don't have a sense of how it's working, because the committee doesn't have a way of collecting that. We do get all the appeals, but should we be doing something with that data? And also talking about the economic benefits of transparency. There are lots of things we could point to, whole industries that have developed based on information government has collected, like Google Maps and other things. But there are opportunities for economic growth through a better transparency regime, and just put those all together and say to the legislature, in 2 more years this is going to be a 50-year-old law. When Nelson Rockefeller and New York was at the forefront about these issues, and we haven't changed. The world has changed around us. How we keep information and use it has changed dramatically, and you want to look at it, legislature, because there are important issues there.
This should be a review, not a reform.
Yeah, it's urging the legislature to act. I mean, you know, and if they want us to do data collection and report to them, that's fine. But it seems our role is to kind of be a prompter of you know, like the canary in the coal mine saying, look, there are issues here and we're falling behind.
Mhm.
So we'll put together a set of paragraphs that address foil turning 50, foil reform, you know, foil's middle-aged, whatever we want to say about foil. And talk about, you know, examining the potential need for, you know, centralized oversight authority, you know, 67 counties, countless cities, school boards. I mean, like, we're talking about something that would require a significant amount of staffing, but we'll put forward the concept of looking at it, and I'm trying to understand what it would take. Enforcement mechanisms, those are certainly, you know, I think I hear all the time they're toothless. That's a big problem. They're expensive and toothless. Timelines, certainly we've had specific legislation year after year that would help with that. Hasn't really gone the distance, but we can talk about that. And proactive disclosure, these are things that both of those things we've talked about in prior reports. We can tee it up as a thematic narrative, and you guys can react to that. That'll be in the next thing that we circulate. That was obviously something that was based on the feedback earlier that we're going to put in the next version, and then you guys can all react to it, hopefully with your written thoughts, and then we'll try to get all of them incorporated. I might have to say, if you want to put stuff in the next draft circulated, please get it to me by some date. I'm not trying to force you to march, but I'm trying to ensure that I get it before I give it incorporated and give it back to you for the next meeting. So obviously, if the date doesn't work for you, you know, let me know. But we're trying to make sure that we get everything that everyone wants included in the next version in. So
and Shoshana, structurally, it would be just as easy in the draft to say, look, on the committee, there were 2 or 3 different views on what we ought to do on this subject. And within the draft itself, say they were A, B, and C. As a committee, let's decide.
Sure, that's fine.
Yeah, I mean, just going back to the beginning of the meeting, I think Franklin used the word acting by consensus. I'm not sure that's quite accurate, because the committee is always, I mean, approval of a majority of the board to, you know, issue the report has always been required, and that hasn't, I mean, I know I have not been here as long as you all, but I have been here under our previous executive director and our current executive director, and I know that there's always been disputes among sort of different members of the committee, and that ultimately approval of the report requires a vote and not just a consensus, an approval of the.
I gotta say, I don't ever recall voting. And we did resolve we certainly had disputes.
We definitely voted, Franklin.
We definitely voted every
voted.
year. It's a requirement of, you know.
Yeah.
And we've had non-unanimous votes for sure.
Yeah. But we resolved our differences. I mean, the one I remember most clearly was, you know, revise or repeal Section 50A, and we resolved it by putting both words in.
There you go. Anybody got anything else?
So, unless there's more specific thoughts that you have on the draft that you have before you, should we move on to the next agenda item?
Could I just, one other thing, this is really minor, but in the discussion of the open meetings law, where we talk about, I do think we need to highlight, as the legislature is thinking about it, the impact of going to technology on the ability of the public to interact informally in meetings. You know, that there's a different, the use of Zoom for meetings does in some ways change the role of the public. You have some discussion in there at the end of point 2, I think it was, and where we make those comments, it was in,
Page
I
16.
guess it was actually at the end of, at the end of your discussion in point 4, you say, we need to ensure that the use of technology preserves members of the public to engage with public bodies. My only thought is I put the flag when we talk about the public, because it's a somewhat role as needs.
We don't really hear every second word, David. You're cutting out every second.
Yeah, David, I was hoping that you will be here with Franklin and I because, that way I can make sure you're not getting distracted by reading an email. But
You can get the end of the table, I know.
It's actually, it's not that. I mean, I'm not suggesting you're distracted, David, but I'm suggesting that I can't hear every other kind of cutting it out.
Having met with David in purpose, he only speaks verbally every second word.
Let me try once more. The main point I was making is in the discussion about preserving public engagement when we change the open meetings law technology, that we should also highlight the role of the press. We should talk about the press and the public.
Okay.
The role of what?
Press and the public.
Oh, got it.
At the end of point 4.
Can you make one more thing, just in case it makes a difference when you're working on the next draft? I was just reading and I realized that it apparently has been happening since 2003. On page 16, the proactive efforts to provide qualified interpreters. It is making, I don't know, I guess it is one of those things that even I can tell you from experience trying to do a presentation as a government agency, it gets, I don't know, I want to say unnecessarily complicated considering technology is supposed to help us, but just whatever we propose, if this is something that we're gonna say, do it or don't do it, or look, or at least consider these things, keep that in mind, because I think whether it is a sign language interpreter or some other interpreter, not every platform works the same way. And sometimes, like right now, right, like if you're on WebEx, maybe only one person is showing up in your screen, as other, or not all of the participants. Sometimes you lose that sign language interpreter, for example, which the sole point is for, obviously you can't hear, you got to see the person. So I know that this particular bill seems like it's been presented, in different ways since 2003, and it does have the language of, if it becomes an undue hardship or all that, but I just want to throw that out there, like as a practical thing again, that sometimes we think technology should be able to allow for that, but sometimes it's not as easy as it sounds, and it can take quite some time to get whatever technology unit, is supporting the public body to provide what's needed, so that, I wouldn't want some legislation out there that it's meant to do good, but it's not providing the support that the public bodies would need to make that happen.
I
Most
agree.
things-
I think there are real issues with the proactive.
Right.
But like most things, technology, it makes this even more complicated rather than less, I think.
Exactly. Yep.
And the definition of proactive is, I don't know what the details are, but we don't want to put an undue burden. I'm sort of a reasonable person myself, but.
Thank you. That was it.
Okay. So the next version will be perfect, and we can vote on it. No, I'm joking. All right. So this next one's yours, Franklin. Process for taking public comment.
Yeah, actually, let me jump to 5 and come back to 4 because it may have bearing. I think you guys are right. We actually voted, although I don't recall a roll call vote for our annual reports in years past. But clearly we operated by consensus, and despite our disputes, we didn't have rules. My proposal would be that we use Robert's Rules of Orders as a guideline for our behavior, at least until we come up with something different that we want to do. I don't know if this requires a motion. Most of us who've served on committees and agencies sort of know Robert's Rules of Order internally. But I think it does provide a framework for making motions, having discussion, accepting amendments if appropriate, and then having a vote. So that would be my suggestion. I don't know that we need to vote on it. Maybe we do, maybe we don't. Maybe Robert's Rules doesn't provide for a vote until we adopt it. But it seems to me that any event, that's my thoughts on it, since at the moment we have sort of no rules. Comments, thoughts?
Well, I would say, I mean, I think that's the default rules of
Yeah.
order that, bodies like adopt. I'm not opposed to it, but I don't want to stress out over technicality also with the Robert's Rule of Order. I actually have a little booklet, right, of just because I needed it for a prior role. And I guess,
Well, that's why I suggested as a guideline as opposed to adopting them, because there are, there are aspects to it that are very regimented that I don't think this committee needs. And again, I just wanted to put it out there, since we'd had an issue back when we were considering our bylaws about whether we were allowed to have discussion before we voted, and that's what made it sort of real to me that we didn't have the usual sort of procedures that I've experienced with other organizations. So I don't know that we need to do anything on it. I just wanted to put it out there, since we're looking at organizing ourselves a little better. That leads to the process for taking public comment. I'd like to make a motion that we, a specific motion, that we accept public comment today with such limitations as the committee deems appropriate. I would suggest a 3-minute time limit, and let's just see how it works. So that's my motion.
So are we voting on the motion?
Well, Robert's Rules would permit
Do we need a
discussion
second for the
and an
motion?
amendment.
Do we need a second?
I've
for
made
that?
a
Is it-
motion.
I'll second that.
I guess I can't remember the order. I guess I was just gonna ask if the staff had looked at what others do, if there was a process we could consider before voting on the motion.
Well,
but I can't remember
because
the
we've been
specific.
working on the annual report since the last time we met pretty intensively. We haven't yet done the survey. All I have is the same anecdotal information I had from before, which is deliberative bodies don't take it, adjudicative bodies and bodies more like school boards, and they take it. So we're still sort of in that no man's land. Absolutely can take it if you want to take it. But I haven't looked at the rules for bodies that do take it, simply because we haven't yet had the opportunity to do that.
Okay, so back to your motion.
Well, I mean, my motion is pending. I just don't see any reason why we wouldn't permit public comment, limited to 3 minutes today. We may not have any takers, because we haven't done this before, but we haven't had public comment the last couple of meetings, and I think it has been a loss.
I
2 meetings ago, but
I guess I keep my concern keeps being, is it any comment? Is it any topic? Do we kind of say we can't control once people are speaking, obviously, but do we make an ask that it is related to the issues that pertain to the committee and open government, which I don't think it includes the pending FOIL with an agency, for example.
that's for the hosting.
I mean, is it 3 minutes until we run out of how much time? You know what I mean? If we agree to 3 minutes, is 3 minutes for 10 minutes? So that's 3 people? Is it 3 minutes for 20 minutes? So, I guess that's the piece I'm trying to figure out.
Well, I'm not bothered about the 3 minutes. I would accept a friendly amendment to limit the topic, but I wouldn't want to limit it too much. I think it ought to relate to the business
Right.
of the Committee on Open Government. And I would accept that limitation.
And then, but what about for how long? We're gonna spend another like 30 minutes, 1 hour? If there's
Well, I
enough
think
people
let's
to
see.
really.
Let's see. I don't think there are hundreds of people waiting. I'm not sure there are any people waiting to comment, but I can think of at least 2 organizations that have attended our meetings and have asked to speak. And it seems to me we could afford 6 minutes or something less than 6 minutes to listen to their comments. If
I
any.
think it would run until
Right.
we decide that we have no more time available.
Well,
So
Yeah.
how much
you know,
time do we have
consistent
available?
with the open meetings law, that would not be consistent with the open meetings law. Just, if we allow comment, we're gonna allow it for anyone who wants to make comment regardless of how long it takes, even with the 3-minute limit. That's what the
Well,
rules
let's
require.
try it.
That's fine, but I just wanna make it clear that any organization, or any body, any person who wants to speak to us at a meeting, all they have to do is let us know and we will schedule them. We've done that in the past and we can continue to do that. As long as the information relates to what this body does.
Mhm.
But happy to do this now, if that's
I
what the
think the
committee.
issue you identified with pre-registration is that it causes them to have to identify themselves and
Yeah,
to
no, I-
decide ahead of time that they want to speak. So I would just say somebody raises their hand. It should pertain to the business of this committee, and we've got a 3-minute outside limit that will be enforced if at the end of 3 minutes or sooner if it's off topic. I mean, I've served on a lot of boards where we've had public comment, and I just can't imagine we're going to have an issue here. It's not
Yeah,
like
Frank-
we've got throngs of people waiting.
You're absolutely right. I guess what I was saying is that you mentioned that there were 2 groups that have wanted to comment and so I think you have someone in mind, and I think those people are not shy about identifying themselves if I know who you're thinking of. So
Right.
we wouldn't have that particular problem with them, but I agree that to the extent that someone wants to remain anonymous and we allow for public comment, we're gonna do it. If you guys vote to say, yes, you can do this, the person can identify themselves as a robot. We don't need to know who they are.
Right. And I don't
Shoshana,
have any particular reason to think that anybody's going to testify today, but I mean, I haven't coordinated this with anyone. It just seems to me we're the Committee on Open Government, and we should be more open than we've been.
We're certainly not in a
Shoshana,
position, Frank, to do testimony. We have no mechanism for that. So I don't know what testimony would be, but if somebody has a comment, we might be able to hear that.
Comment is what I mean.
Yeah, Shoshana, you said that if you hear one, you have to hear them all. I don't mind hearing them all. The question is, do they all have to be heard contiguously, or can you say the time for today has run out, and we'd be more than happy to continue hearing you at the next meeting?
Not in my opinion.
In my opinion, we'd have to listen to them all during that meeting.
But let's see. If everyone who's joining us wants to comment, then it shouldn't run more than 40 minutes. So that's fine.
How many people are on our call today? Besides us,
Yeah, there's 10.
how many outside non-board members, non-committee members, and staff are on this call?
10.
How many?
10.
10.
10. Okay.
Can we clarify before we take any kind of vote that this vote is just for today's meeting, correct? And number 2, I would propose that it only be 2 minutes rather than 3. And lastly, that we don't do this until the very end of the meeting, after all other topics are discussed.
Bill, what I was going to suggest is that, I think that what Franklin is outlining is reasonable. I think it definitely needs to be germane. I would ask 2 things. One, that anyone who has a pending full request with an agency, an appeal, or a request for an opinion from the committee, not discuss those matters. And I request that simply because I am a records access officer and I can't comment on them, so it puts me in an uncomfortable situation, which I hope, people respect. But number two, I would also like to either limit this motion to this meeting or pass along with this motion the request or requirement that people either anonymously or not, I think they can do it anonymously, so correct me if I'm wrong, simply, it doesn't even have to be, I don't need or I wouldn't expect people to give a thesis on what they're going to talk about, but simply request to speak prior to the next meeting so we do know, and we know exactly what we're doing and exactly how many people want to speak, and then let those people speak rather than not knowing ahead of time. If it's, if we can't make it anonymous, I think that's a problem. I think it should be anonymous if people want it to be. But those would be my suggestions. I don't know if anybody else has any comment.
I'd also like to comment that, it's open comment, but it's not for response. I don't think we should have it where we're responding to questions or anything. We're just listening to the public comment, and then we'll take that under advisement.
Yep, I think that's
Agreed.
I think that has to be how.
I agree with that.
Joel, just one thing with respect to your sort of request or your recommendation there. I think that we certainly can make any commenting anonymous, any sort of desire to comment anonymous. I think the problem arises is that when somebody who attends doesn't know that they want to comment until they've heard the meeting and then they want to comment. We can't sort of artificially limit who comments once we invite comment. We can try to suggest that they be germane, and we can, but I think that there are going to be people who don't pay attention to that rule. And the question then becomes what we do. Most of the time what we do is wait for those 3 minutes to run out and then move on to the next commenter.
Exactly.
Well, it'll be very difficult to sort of put any artificial constraints on, once we open it, on who can comment and really about what. You may hear about a FOIL request that somebody has, but as mentioned, we don't have to respond to it.
Right.
We probably are constrained from doing so anyway. Many agencies probably can't, especially if it's progressed to, potentially a litigation or through the appeal.
Exactly. Yeah. Okay. Well, like the case, which I don't think, that makes sense to me. Then yeah, I guess whoever's listening, please don't ask me about a pending FOIL because I won't respond to it. I don't know. I guess that's what I'll say.
I think if people want to raise questions about pending FOILs, they should be free to do so. They raise the committee all the time for comment. So I don't know what we're saying.
That's it. I'm prohibiting David from joining.
Better connection. All right, we've lost you all completely in New York.
Well, David.
We've lost David. We have Kristen's meme on our screen.
How about if I
There you go.
There you go.
There you go. There you go. There's echo, and I think it's because maybe Kristen's audio is on, and perhaps it's because you're in the same room.
Kristen, cut your audio off.
There you go. So sorry, because I really just haven't used the Roberts Rules of Order, but can you amend your motion?
All right. I think where we are is 3 minutes limited to the business of Coog, and we're not going to comment on appeal or anything else. If somebody speaks, they can say what they want to, and we won't respond. That wasn't a very organized motion. Let's say
I think
my motion is that we have a 3-minute limit today, permit public comment. We would like for the comment to be limited to the business of Coog. And we won't respond, but I don't think that needs to be part of the motion, but I never intended to respond.
Can we do it at the end of the meeting?
The business on the agenda or any business of?
I think it should be any business.
Yeah, I agree.
Of Coog.
Are you talking about limiting it to today's meeting, or was that a motion for all times?
I could go either way. I can remake the motion at the next meeting.
I thought
I
we were
would
gonna
say
do
we do
research
it.
before we have a long-term plan here. Right?
Well, I would just say we do it until we decide not to do it, would be my preference, but I could live with just today.
I wouldn't wanna, yeah, I'd rather just do it just for today and keep explaining, since we're not sure how it's gonna go. It would be good to not tie ourselves, but I'm happy to entertain the
Well, I
motion
don't
at
think-
each meeting.
Yeah, I don't think we're ever tied, but, okay, so today, if that's what you all want to limit it to, limited to the business of Coog in 3 minutes.
I
How does
second
that
that.
look?
So should we have a vote? Do we have anyone who objects? How about that? Because then I think that's easier. It sounds like there's people who wish to agree to that. But do I hear any objections to that motion? Hearing none, I believe that the motion has passed unanimously by those members present.
Right. The third thing that I asked to be put on the agenda the topic is research and data analysis. I circulated an article that was sent to me that showed what people are doing with some of our data. And that raised the question that someone alluded to earlier. I'm not sure if it was Dave or someone else. But analysis of our own data. Do we set about to collect data and be some sort of a repository of it? And I just thought that it's not directly related to our annual report, but I thought it was something we should be thinking about. I had a factual question relating to it that maybe the staff can answer. In the last year, how many FOIL requests has Coog received for its own records?
Oh, that's a good, Kristen might be able to find that out as we talk about this. I think she's gonna have to look it up. But I think she can do
Okay.
that.
Because I thought the request that resulted in the analysis in that article was something I would like to have known, that a request like that was pending to us. Among other things, I want to make sure that this committee is aware of how we are dealing with our own FOIL requests.
Certainly.
So I think that that's something you might keep us apprised of going forward, especially because I can't imagine there are but so many FOIL requests served on us, although maybe there'll be more now. I don't know.
So we've always had a few that most agencies have received an uptick, it seems like, in FOIL requests generally since the pandemic began. But the request that you're talking about, Franklin, was a request. Basically, they wanted to see all of the appeals that we had been given, that we had been provided pursuant to the statutory requirement that any agency subject to FOIL send to the Committee on Open Government a copy of the appeal and the decision rendered on the appeal. What we get is spotty coverage and compliance with that particular provision of law. We do get that stuff. It, progressively has become more by email, but over the years, many entities still send it to us by snail mail. When I first joined the committee, there was no tracking of the mail that came in. So the thousands of appeals per year that we received by mail were just filed by chronological order in a file cabinet. And they were reviewed to make sure that somebody wasn't off the rails. And if somebody was off the rails, then Kristen or the former executive director might have reached out and said, hey, what's going on here? But by and large, they were read and filed. Since when I got here, we did receive 1 or 2 FOIL requests saying, hey, I live in town, 123. How many FOIL appeals has town 123 sent you in the past 5 years? That was not a question that we could answer with any reliability, because we could look through our email and for town 123 and potentially come up with an answer based on what they'd sent us by email. But if town 123 sent us some by email and some by mail, or all by mail, we would have no reasonable way to collect that information. So starting in about June of 2020, by that time, we thought about this right away. And then by June of 2020, we started to track that information in a log. And we started to respond to people with the log with data driven from the log or the log itself when people asked for it, so that they could see what Town 123 was sending to us. So the FOIL request we got was based on sort of what fields of data do you track in your log, and sort of how many FOIL appeals have you received. And so we were able to give them the log from the time we started to collect that information until the time of the FOIL request. But because we sometimes get just the appeal and or just the determination but not the appeal, sometimes we get neither, it was impossible to draw conclusions, for example, like how many FOIL appeals resulted in an overturning of the records access officer's decision. Very difficult to know how many of those FOIL appeal decisions resulted in an upholding. Not easy to determine with the spotty data that we have. So we can give the appeal log, but it's hard to, we didn't collect the field of data that said, was this appeal denied in full, in part? What parts weren't upheld? Were documents produced? A lot of times the appeal determination says, we're remanding this back to the records access officer for more work, which is not contemplated by FOIL, but which a lot of FOIL appeals officers still do, this concept of remanding the request. So there's not a lot of data that we can track in our log that's meaningful, but because we simply don't get it, and it's very hard to extract. And I'm willing to bet that we have maybe a 60% compliance rate, maybe it's even lower, with the provision of law that requires these entities to send us these pieces of data. So again, we're doing better than we ever used to, because now we can give the log that logs it from 2020, mid-2020 to now, and we have those pieces that make it easier for us to report to you how many FOIL appeals that we have received in a year, which we couldn't really report to you before because they were in a file cabinet. So things are progressing, but because of how variable the data is, it's difficult to draw conclusions from it and to put fields of data in a log that make it super meaningful. So the article I believe you referenced is reflecting on the log that we have, which is it's not a terrific thing, but it's better than we used to have.
And that's great, Shoshana. I'm happy about that. 60% compliance with the law is not acceptable. Can we?
Well, we don't really know, but we don't get it. We don't have any way of knowing.
Maybe we should publish or send around some sort of reminder that this data is supposed to be provided to us, and there is some reason why the law was put into place, presumably. But I appreciate the difficulties with such a low compliance, but I think we ought to take steps to remind people that it's the law. Since you tell me it's the law.
Well, yeah, again, I mentioned, I'm not sure how many, because this is a data that's a dynamic piece of data. I don't know how many agencies, as defined in the FOIL law, exist. Right? That every day a new one is born and another one dies, because there are certain criteria that are ticked off on a list, and if you hit those, then you're subject to FOIL. That's a very dynamic piece of data. I don't know how to communicate with that dynamic list to say, hey, I'm reminding you to send me these.
Well, some of them, because you're getting one piece of data but not another from them. Why don't you all work on it? The staff should work on it and report back about how we can increase the compliance with the law that requires data to be filed with us.
It's not data, it's copies of the appeals.
It's copies of the appeals.
Yeah, but which constitutes data for your log? Because I don't think that's a very good, and I realize it's an estimate, but I would just suggest y'all cogitate on it and see if you can come up with some remedy for the obvious non-compliance with the law, which would be good.
Where it's obvious, where we get one piece of information and not the other, we let them know. Please send, you've sent us piece A, but we need piece B. Where we notice that, but what we can't do is say, hey, you gave us neither A nor B, because unless a constituent, and this often will happen, or from time to time will happen, someone notifies us, hey, have you received any FOIL appeals from town ABC? And we look through our now log and through our email repository of where we have kept these in the past before the now log existed, and we say no, or yes, we've had 3, and they say, well, did you get the ones about me? Because I had a FOIL request and I had an appeal. And so if we get these pieces of information, we can check with the entity and potentially fix the problem that if one exists. But that's obviously not a systematic way of approaching it.
It seems to me, what you're saying, Shoshana, is that you have the procedures to deal with it anecdotally, but not statistically.
Well, that's true, because we don't even know all of the FOIL entities that exist in the state, so we can't possibly have a more routinized way of handling it, because we don't know what we don't know.
And there's no enforcement mechanism.
Yeah,
that might be something we could get addressed.
Could I just suggest, this highlights for me, it's another area where the law is outdated. This requirement that the agencies send a copy of the appeal to the committee clearly was so that they could be tracked and we could see if there were agencies that were creating problems. But just getting a copy of the appeal doesn't really give us what we need. And you could easily reform the system and have a web page where an agency has to input certain data, that they got an appeal and who it was from and what. And if that's what we're trying to track, it's just, again, what we're getting requires so much work to get the data that's useful when there would be a different system that could get us the data we want. I just point out, it's just another area where we could update things and it would be much more useful.
What's the other stuff on the research and data analysis?
No, I think the other component was, should we, and this sort of follows on Dave's comments, should we be proactively collecting data? It's a question of staffing as well as our mandate, but it seems to me, and I know that one of the good government groups, I think it's Reinvent Albany, but I'm not positive, has suggested that we play a role in collecting data about compliance and non-compliance with FOIL, and just data about who's making requests and the like. So I just flag it. I don't think we need to discuss it today, but I think if we meet after we get our report done in the new year, when we're talking about our mission and what we'd like to be, that we put that out for our consideration. We ready for public comment?
Ready? Yeah. Any other business that anyone wants to raise? No?
Shauna, do we have any update on the vacancies? Have you heard anything?
I do not have an update on vacancy.
Oh my God.
Just asking.
One day you won't even have to ask the question.
Yeah. 4 years.
So do you look at who then it's logged on, and do they send you a message, Kristen or Candace?
There's a raise hand function.
What I'm gonna do is have, if people would like to provide public comment, I'm gonna have them raise their hands, and I will try to pay attention to the order in which their hands are raised. Right now I've got 2 people that have their hands raised, so we will start with the first speaker. Just give me a moment to get set here. All right, first speaker, PW, if you would like to give public comment.
I think you said PW?
I'm giving initials in case anyone wants to remain anonymous.
No problem. I didn't hear what you said. This is Paul Wolf. Thank you. I serve as president of the New York Coalition for Open Government. We are a nonprofit, nonpartisan organization dedicated to transparency issues. Just wanted to make 3 quick points. The FOIL appeal process, that's the information that's sent to you, I think could be a very valuable resource. Perhaps we could at the very least send a communication to, there's town clerk associations, there's city clerks associations. Often it's the town and city clerks that are processing FOIL requests. Perhaps we can reach out to their associations to remind their members that they should be sending the FOIL appeals to the committee. We probably could do the same to the New York Association of Counties, New York Conference of Mayors. The authority's budget office oversees all the industrial development agencies. So perhaps if we just reach out to a few groups, we might be able to make more people aware of this. Secondly, thank you very much for doing the case summaries and the open meetings law summaries. I find them very helpful. And along those lines, I'm always looking at the opinions on the committee's website. It would be great when a new opinion is issued, if you could post it perhaps under your news heading. You're probably doing like an opinion a week or so, but you know, if we could see the new opinions that are coming out, it would be a great way for our organization and just those interested to see what's going on out in the field on different open government issues. So if you're able just to post new opinions, that would be a great piece of information. And that's all. Thank you.
That was 2. Okay.
Thank you. I'm going to go on to the next speaker. Speaker RF, you are unmuted.
Hi, can
Rachel.
folks hear me?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay, I would try to put on video too, but I'm not sure I can do that quickly. Anyway, my name is Rachel Foss. I'm the Senior Research Analyst for reInvent Albany. I do appreciate the opportunity to provide public comment today. Just on that topic, I would highly encourage you to allow public comment regularly at your meetings. I think it's something that would be helpful for the public to be able to weigh in on to the state's Committee on Open Government. You know, I think for the State Committee on Open Government to allow public comment is highly appropriate given your mission. I would suggest that you do it regularly, and that one thing to do, I know there was discussion about how to facilitate it. Other bodies do require members to sign up in advance, but it's not a long time in advance. It's the day of the meeting, the morning of the meeting. And I think that that's helpful because, you know, often a meeting materials may not be posted until 24 hours in advance. And you may not know, a member of the public may not know a week in advance whether they want to participate at a public meeting until they know what the agenda items are. So I think allowing flexibility and for members to sign up, if you do want to have a sign up process, I would say do it as soon before the meeting as possible. Just on some of the discussion items that you've had today, you know, I think that on the discussions of your annual report regarding the open meetings law and the freedom of information law, these are highly significant, you know, parts of the state's transparency laws that I think, given the change in administration and what we've learned from COVID, really do require a lot more public input. And I would encourage the committee to gather public input on those issues as you're developing your report. You could do this, you know, through perhaps a dedicated COOG committee meeting, or you could set up a separate meeting to allow members of the public to provide input on these 2 items as you're developing your recommendations. Speaking for reInvent Albany, I know we have a proposal that we are working on for hybrid meetings to require both in-person and remote access for members of the public, both for you know, general meetings, but also for public comment, to allow public comment in real time, like you all are doing today. And similarly on FOIL, I think, you know, as noted by Commissioner Schultz, there's It is a highly important part of the law that really requires an overhaul and an in-depth look. And I think there are a lot of stakeholder groups beyond those who are present here today who would be highly interested in attending a COOG meeting specifically on FOIL, where you would gather input about best practices and recommendations, including, like was suggested, the committee collecting data on FOIL. I think that's an important part that's highly in line with your mission. Lastly,
Thank you, Rachel, for your comment.
All right, our next speaker has initials M.A.
Yes, I am a member of the public, general public. I would like to thank the committee for an opportunity to speak. One of the members, there was a discussion about enforcement and how different states had quasi-judicial enforcement powers. Indiana is a really good model for that. At the National FOIA conference, Mr. Luke Britt spoke about his unique position. So that might be a good resource for the committee to investigate. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, it appears that we have acknowledged everyone that is interested in speaking today. So I think we're done with the public comment portion.
I'd like to just comment on something Paul Wolf recommended, which is that the new opinions be posted under the news section as released. Is there any practical reason why we can't, or any reason why we shouldn't do that?
None at all. We're happy to do that.
Yeah, sounds like a good idea.
Yeah. And I think I will just comment that I thought public comment was helpful.
It was painless.
and painless. I told you I thought it would be.
Much better than last time, I think.
Anything else? If not, I'll make a motion to adjourn.
I'll second.
All in
Can
favor?
I just comment on the comments too? I'm just thinking about
Can't get out of here.
that some sort of a platform for interest groups to come together and talk about reform is a good idea. And I'm just thinking about, my thought was that we should be encouraging the legislature to do that. But maybe one thing we should think about in drafting the report is suggest that the committee is prepared to provide a platform, in conjunction with the legislature or something, or anyway, it's just a thought. I mean, in the past, when we were focused on 50A, we did invite interested stakeholders to come and talk with us. We had a couple of lawyers with news organizations, and the head of the corrections union came. We could do something like early next year if we were so inclined. So it seems to be better to engage the legislature, but the report might suggest an either or, that the legislature should take this up, and that we intend to begin fact finding or something. Just a thought.
That sounds good.
I think my motion to adjourn is still pending.
I think we stopped that. All in favor.
Do we have any objections to that motion? Okay, hearing none, I say that we are adjourned.
Excellent.
Take care, everyone.
Very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate
See
it.
you all next time. Bye.
All right.
Cut us off. Cut us off. I'm in time.
I apologize, I didn't know I was supposed to have math.